Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining today's webinar, The Definitive DevOps and DataOps for Snowflake. We're excited to welcome today's guest, Rithesh Makkena, Global Head of Partner Sales Engineering at Snowflake, and our own DataOps CTO, Guy Adams. Just a few points of organization for today. At the bottom of the screen, there you'll see a Q&A button, so please feel free to put your questions in there throughout the webinar. At the end, we'll have a brief Q&A for any to talk about the questions and answer them. And that's it for housekeeping. I will hand it over to Guy and Ritesh.
Thanks, Kim. And yeah, welcome everybody and welcome Rithesh. Great to have you here. I guess maybe we could start, but if you could give sort of your perspective and Snowflake's perspective on the whole topic of DevOps and DataOps and why it's so important.
Sure, Guy. Yeah, absolutely. So one of the biggest thing like what DataOps bringing to the table is as customers are trying to churn out like a lot of data products which they're building on top of Snowflake, it's equally important to give the scalability not just for the IT teams, but also how we are enabling some of the business teams as well to look into how they can not only churn out some of these data products which are powered by Snowflake, but also to understand how their business are using different data products and just to make them better on day-to-day life cycle. So, and specifically why we are seeing the great adoption is specifically the data ops is enabling the data ops perspective, the code engineering, or anything like end-to-end, specifically focused on the Snowflake components, unlike any other open source platforms which are on the market today. So that is the biggest takeaway that at least like what I see in the market.
Okay, great. And maybe since you're on the the kind of partnership side of Snowflake, maybe you could talk a little bit about DataOps.live and where we sit in the Snowflake partner ecosystem.
Obviously, yeah. So everyone knows that you are the our elite partner. That's not a secret, and you're also one of our key ISV powered by Snowflake partners. But not many people are aware like how we internally, like specifically the sales engineering organization, how we use DataOps.live at scale for the entire organization, for the SEO organization globally, right? So we as a team in Snowflake, we build a lot of industry demos where we would like to go and showcase the art of possibility of like from the Snowflake perspective, how we are solving many industry use case problems, the real life use case problems. And in order to make it more scalable and also from the time perspective for all the SEs to irrespective of their knowledge, either on the AI side of the business or on the Snowpark side of the business for the core data engineering, or is it like end-to-end DevOps kind of a workflow or any platform capability, either you have that specialization or not, how to enable SEs to really get this demos going in less than like a couple of minutes and really be ready to rather than spending time in building these demos one by one in each of their accounts, how can they actually focus on getting more prepared in front of the customers to demo these is like one of the biggest I would say like objective for us, like when we started our journey like 18 months back when we started evaluating and we all came across DataOps, like where the entire organization and the leadership felt you are the right ones who can bring that scalability and the time to how to take these like some of the most complex demos, make it a lot more easier, irrespective of like where as an SE where you're starting the journey in front of the customer. So yeah, that's what I quickly wanted to share. Like I said, like everyone knows about where you live from the partnership tier perspective, but also I don't think many of the people are not aware how internally at Snowflake we use DataOps for our own success.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we got a little bit later on to talk about that as well. So maybe I can kind of take this down to a slightly more technical level, explaining kind of how Snowflake and DataOps work together. This is a standard Snowflake logical architecture slide, and I was asked to kind of paint a picture of where DataOps fits in here. And initially I thought it was going to be quite complicated. It's a big diagram coming end to end, but actually it turns out that DataOps positioning is pretty straightforward. It's the bit at the top there. And it's important to understand what DataOps isn't. DataOps isn't anything on the left-hand side. It's not anything to do with ingestion. It's not anything in the middle. It's nothing to do with transforming data. It's nothing to do with the way that data materialize. It's nothing to do with data sharing. It's nothing to do with governance. And it's nothing to do with the right-hand side. It's nothing to do with how that data is presented, except that it orchestrates all of that. So when I say it's nothing to do with it, it means it's not doing the ingestion, it's not doing the transformation, it's not doing the data sharing, it's not doing the presentation of the dashboards, the applications, or whatever, but it's orchestrating, building, testing, promoting, all of those pieces. So it's that end-to-end control plane. And I think this diagram kind of shows really nicely that the way that the way that everything flows together. But the other way that I've started explaining to people the way that the relationship works, and I found this quite effective, is if you think about how Snowflake has developed over time. I was a Snowflake customer back in 2017, so I've seen quite a growth in the Snowflake platform. In the early days, we were using Snowflake for relatively simple use cases compared to everything that's possible today. So the functional capabilities that Snowflake had didn't require that many non-functional components to support it. And by non-functional components, we mean, everything that you need to make a fully operationalized system. So, developer experience, automated testing, CI/CD, versioning, packaging, collaboration tools. When the use cases were simple, those non-functional components were simple as well. But then, more power and more capability comes along, more third-party technology, and the partner ecosystem gets bigger. So there's more requirements. And then, Cortex and Streamlit come along, and so there's more requirements. And now we've got container services, and there's native apps. And so every time more functionality appears above the line, there's more of this non-functional components required below the line. And one of our jobs essentially is Snowflake has been wildly successful at taking these complicated things and making them simple for people to consume. To be able to consume generative AI with a couple of simple SQL statements, to be able to deploy any workload using container services, things like that. Build very, very simple interfaces with a few lines of Python and stream it. So Snowflake's done a fantastic job at making the functional components really easy to consume. We see our job as to do the mirror below the line, is to make all of that operationalization very easy to consume as well. And that means kind of standardizing it all. That means making it look and feel the same, providing a unified developer experience. And one of the reasons that's so important for our customers is because this is only accelerating. I heard, I'm not sure if it's a popular or not, but I heard Snowflake's going to release into GA more features this year than they have in the whole of Snowflake previously, like the whole of Snowflake's history. So the rate of releasing of new features is increasing exponentially, which means the rate of being able to, or having to, accommodate and adapt to these new features in their operationalization, in their workflows, and their CI/CD is going to have to increase at the same rate. And that's kind of what my team spend most of their lives doing, is taking all these new Snowflake capabilities and working out, how do we make them fit really easily from a customer developer perspective.
That's great, Guy. I have a quick follow-up question on it, right? Like you just mentioned about it's not even like next year, right? Like this year itself, like everyone have noticed like how many features like went GA across the whole platform, like so many new features. Obviously, we all started our journey like with Roche many years ago. And what you're doing today might be completely, it's not different, but just to articulate that how many features that we have released and how we are operationalizing them at scale, maybe can you dig a bit more deeper? Like what are the things that you are actually focusing on from your product point of view to bring in all these our capabilities being addressed, specifically all the GA features that we have addressed. So I'm sure like it's quite different, like what happened with like Roche, like many years back, like 5 years back, with drastically the product suite is like completely different too. So if you just want to double click on some of the
absolutely. So I think when we first started, back for just about 4 years ago with our first customers, really what we were doing was just the CI/CD piece. It was just that orchestration piece, and it was really focusing on what at the time was the sort of the data warehousing pipelines that people were trying to build. They said, okay, I want to orchestrate some data ingestion, I want to orchestrate some data transformation, I want to orchestrate some data quality testing. Maybe in the same tool, maybe across 2 or 3 different tools. But that was kind of where people were looking at, and I think things have expanded in all directions. So first of all, the scope, the end-to-end scope of what people are doing has increased dramatically, particularly as we talk about data products, because data products, that back in when we first started this, all anyone was trying to produce at the output was some tables, some views, and maybe they wrap those up in a data share. But that was it. That was it. What you got at the end of it was something that you then had to put a dashboard on top of or write your own SQL for. More and more and more now people are saying, well, my output might not be a table or a view. It might not be a dashboard. It might be a custom application. It might be a machine learning model. It might be a container, React application. So people are starting to see on the right hand side of that flow more and more and more things that are considered part of the data product. And that's something we've always advocated for, is that the data product is the data and the things on the right hand side that are presenting that data to consumers. And it could be all of those. You can have a data product that's got a SQL interface and an application interface and an API interface, and that's all completely legitimate. So I think the logical scope end to end of what people are doing has changed, but also the development, the organizational scope. So we started off working on the CI/CD piece. Then people start saying, okay, we need a lot more observability. We need to see what's going on. So we then added all of our observability functionality. And then about 2 years ago, what we really started to do was take, what had been bugging me for a long time, having a software development background, was, why are software engineers so much more efficient than the equivalent data engineers, even if they're working in multiple languages? And the answer is they had an integrated development experience, even if they were kind of playing with different languages at the same time. And so what we realized we wanted to do was build on top of Snowflake a unified developer experience. So we wanted them to be able to go to one place, and it doesn't matter whether they're building SQL code, whether they're playing with Cortex, whether they're trying to build a container service, whether they're trying to build and package a native application. It shouldn't matter. There should be one place I can go, and everything looks and feels the same. So then we built DataOps.live, which is kind of our unified, fully cloud-based development layer. And then most recently, kind of in parallel with Cortex, we've built our generative AI capabilities, which have been an absolute game changer, because what they've been doing is dramatically reducing the technical barrier, because people can do so much more with less technical expertise. I did a blog a couple of months ago, if you saw it, where built a fully functional, quite sophisticated Streamlit application with writing no Python at all. It was all done using generative AI. But that then goes hand in hand with Create, and Create is our move really into the first time we're moving into that completely different persona. All of those other capabilities were really built predominantly for data engineers. Maybe with different specializations, but predominantly for data engineers, where Create is very much targeted at the business user. These are people who don't live in IT. These are people that live in finance or HR or logistics or supply chain. And it's taking the concept of, and really our goal is, how do we get it so that a company can build and lifecycle 95% of the data products without having to necessarily go through without requiring data engineering. Obviously data engineers need to be there. They're building all the core infrastructure, they're setting the principles, the processes, and everything else. But the actual iteration of those data products, they want to push into the domain. And that's really where we're going with Create. And I think that's really the next big leap for us, is and we've got certainly some of our big customers now are getting to the point where they're saying, yeah, we're able to do 70, 80, 90% of data products are being built, maintained, and modified and lifecycled without needing to call on a highly paid, highly skilled data engineer. We'll save them for the really tricky, there's always the 10% of really tricky problems and non-standard problems. Great, let's have them work on those. But the ones that are simple, day to day, let's have the business users who understand the data do that for themselves.
That's great. So the reusability of the framework at its core, right? So that is great to hear. And maybe just a quick follow-up to that. really quick would be obviously like there are other specifically if I'm coming from the engineering background, and specifically I'm used to using some of the open source community like Airflow or Jenkins. Like, what's your pitch to this personas? Specifically, why should I be focused on DataOps? How is it different from some of the open source community like offerings which are there?
So the reality is they are serving two quite separate needs. So if you look at something like, and I would put kind of Apache Airflow, Jenkins, probably Azure DevOps, all in a similar bucket. They're all infinitely flexible. Any of these can do anything. Any of these can do Snowflake environment management. Any of these can do infrastructure as code. Any of these can do native app building. Any of these can build Streamlit apps. Any of these can build and deploy containers. But you have to write the code for that yourself, for everything. I kind of like it, it's, you can build anything, but what you start, but you've got to build it yourself. You've got to build absolutely everything else. You've got a pile of wood and a pile of nails. And yes, with enough time and enough skill, you could turn your pile of wood and nails and screws into, a nice gazebo. But what a lot of organizations are doing is, and we have a lot of organizations who come to us from Airflow or from Jenkins or whatever, say, look, what we've realized is, we could do this, and with a 5 or 10 person team for 3 years, we could build something, and then we need to maintain a 5-person team to maintain it going forward, because remember that exponential accelerating curve of Snowflake features means that there's an exponential amount of work to keep up with it. You're not aiming at a static target. If you get to where Snowflake is in 3 years' time, Snowflake will be so far beyond that you won't be able to see them. So, it's a really, really challenging problem, even for a full-time organization like ours. But some people have tried to do that, and a lot of people that try to do that then subsequently kind of become our customers. What we're saying is, look, if you want a gazebo, go and don't buy a pile of wood and nails and a hammer. Buy a gazebo, because if your goal is to throw a party, then spend your time on throwing the party, not on building a gazebo. It's the same thing. If you're a data engineering team, then be a data engineering team. Be a great data engineering team. Don't try and be a software development team, because it is very, very, very different, and there is an enormous amount of complexity in it. And we've been doing this for, we've got, I don't know how many hundred, man years worth of development and patents and all sorts of other things on this now. So it's not easy just to take, an open source, can do anything like Airflow and actually turn it into something that does all of the things that an organization really needs to be effective at, particularly at scale. That's the one thing I will really stress, is that we hear it all the time from potential customers. They say, oh well, an engineer spent a couple of weeks on their laptop and got XYZ working. The big mistake that most organizations make, and a lot of managers don't really understand it, is the difference in one engineer getting one thing working on their laptop and a team of 50 engineers or 100 engineers being able to collaborate on something effectively is immeasurable. The gulf is so wide. It's how these systems scale more than how you can get one simple end-to-end demo is really where the difference lies.
That's great. I think like one of the big takeaway, specifically from our even from internal usage, is at least like from the differentiation that what I can see from my point of view is DataOps.live is like specifically focused on the Snowflake components, right? Rather than Airflow, that's not specific to Snowflake itself. So that is the biggest takeaway as well, selfishly, because you're making, you're making and addressing the, your innovation is happening based upon the components and the platform features that we release, and you're really targeting the Snowflake community and these practices within the customers to make their operations day to day a lot more easier and effective.
I think the other thing that's worth mentioning there is we talk about this as DataOps because that's where we started, and fundamentally Snowflake is a data platform, but obviously it's now, in the same way that Snowflake is more than the data platform, really a DataOps solution for Snowflake needs to be more than just DataOps. Now when you've got people developing for Snowpark and developing for Streamlit, you've now got really all of the requirements of software DevOps there, and now you've got people building and deploying containers and, building, multi-container, applications and deploying them as native apps and things like that with SPCS. So you've got all these kind of cloud ops requirements as well. So really, to be effective in the Snowflake ecosystem today, it's not a matter of having a DataOps platform and you also need a DevOps platform and a CloudOps platform, but actually you need one that does all of those things, because then they're not separate silos. Snowflake brings all of those together functionally, which is incredible. For users, it makes so powerful, it's so easy to do these things. But obviously from an operations perspective, you've got to be handling the data side of things, the software side of things, and effectively the cloud ops containerization side of things as well. So I think one of the things that I wanted to drill down to a little bit is just talk about some of the things that were released at Summit last year, and talk about some of the new interfaces. Because it's one of the things that I think Snowflake's got dramatically better at in the last sort of 12 months is making standardizing the interfaces and the different ways that you can kind of interact with Snowflake. There was a great blog released on the Snowflake blog that encourage you to go and read, with the key takeaways from Summit 24. But it was talking about all of the building blocks that are being released, particularly database change management. We can talk about in a little bit. Certainly Snowflake now say, okay, well, we can take stuff in from a Git repository natively rather than having to kind of do manual external work, and more of Snowflake's doing more and more to enable CI/CD to be done effectively. But I think the real kind of key for us here is this this principle that Snowflake provides the engineering building blocks, which is what Snowflake's always done. Snowflake's never tried to provide, at a functional level, provide, full applications. Snowflake provides the building blocks and, the best building blocks out there, the easiest to use building blocks, and then partners with organizations to, put those together to build real applications. And it's the same in the operations space. Snowflake brings the engineering building blocks and partners with us to bring, which is, today the only DataOps solution specifically built for Snowflake.
Absolutely. Yeah, that is the core component, right? Like we provide those building blocks, but how do you bring all those the components together? Because the orchestration engine is like what makes them really talk to each other and work them like seamlessly at scale. And that's where like we really see the DataOps.live bringing the true value of bringing all our core components together, all the platform features that we are releasing, to your point.
Yeah, and it's actually, I mean, it's one of the things that we very much value about our relationship with Snowflake is because we're kind of at the forefront of working on this together. We get to work with some incredible people in Snowflake engineering and Snowflake product about where the next version of this is going, because very often the things that are announced at at Summit last year, we were working with engineering on Snowflake engineering 12 months prior to that, because we've we spend our life driving Snowflake programmatically. So when Snowflake engineering want to know, hey, what are the use cases? How do people want it to work? How should we handle this, that, and the other? They'll often come and talk to us and share design documents with us, because we're going to be one of their most demanding power users, if you like. So I think kind of jumping into a few of those new interfaces, I think the one that certainly got me the most excited, because and it's moved, by the way, massively since it was released at Summit, was the new Snowflake CLI. There had been a Snow CLI for a long time, but the new Snowflake CLI is taking quite a different approach, and much covering a much wider range of the overall Snowflake functionality. We've been using it since the pre-1.0 days. And so much of what we're doing in DataOps now is using this as one of our interfacing layers. So so much of of parts of DataOps is using the Snow CLI to instruct things to happen, to monitor things, and it's I'd say it's certainly the most flexible and easy to use way of interfacing with Snowflake. But there's also the Python APIs now we're starting to use more and more. Particularly when we're doing things like our application development kit, which is our kind of a native app builder, where we're doing things like, okay, well, I need to I need to go away and create a service and then wait for the service to come back up and get some details about it, then go and create an endpoint and wait for that to come up. And when there's a lot of backwards and forwards and iterations, we found that like the Python APIs are really, really good for that. because you're getting them, the stuff back in machine readable format. So when you're trying to write, things that are multi-step, multi-stage transactional, we really love the Python APIs. They're not suited for everybody. Obviously, they're targeted at a very specific persona. Very much they're targeted at the personas of the sort of people that that work in my organization, who are top-notch Python engineers and Python developers. But for those people that do want it and do have those use cases, it's very, very valuable. So the way that we see all of those interfaces, if you bring them together now, whether it's one of our CI/CD pipelines, we used to have SQL, then we had Snowpark and Snowpark data frames. Now we got the Snow CLI and the Python API. Each one of those has its own use cases. I would not say at any point soon are we going to stop using any one of those. I think they all have their own use cases. They all have reasons that they are useful. They all have reasons that we would choose to use one over the other. But it doesn't matter whether we're talking about pipelines, whether we're talking about our develop interface, whether we're talking about our create interface. We see kind of all of those are a pool of interfaces that we can pull from and choose to use to and we'll pick the best one for whatever we're trying to do. Should we talk about change management? I know that's one of one of my favorite topics.
Absolutely. Yeah. Actually, I know this is like one thing, like you were super excited about this. So would love to know more. Well, what made you specifically on the database change management got you so excited about? Like, is there specific customer challenges that you've been like saying? What made you think about this is something? What?
Yeah,
Yeah, just the thought
yes,
process. I'd love to know more about.
it's really the thing that got us most excited about this is solving problems in the ideal place to solve them. So one of the design principles that we've had since day zero is we never want to reinvent a wheel that's already been well invented. So when we came along and we said, right, following all good DevOps and CloudOps principles that came before us, in DataOps world, everything should be deployed using declarative infrastructure as code. And that was a non-negotiable for us because in the cloud infrastructure world and the software world, we've been doing it for a decade plus, and it was just universally accepted as the right way to do things. But there was no way of doing that in the Snowflake ecosystem. So we had to build it. And we used some Terraform, which was good for that. The problem, Terraform is really not good in the database world at all. It's really designed very specifically for certain types of environments. So as a particular example, Terraform expects that when you do one generate, you get one action, or when you take one action, you get one object back. If that generate is a clone database, you don't get one object back. You get a database plus 10 schemas plus 300 tables and views, and Terraform can't cope with that. It can't cope with the fact that it took one action but generated hundreds of objects as a result. The other problem is it's pretty much completely linear. So if you've got 10,000 grants and you want to go and check which ones have changed, it checks each grant with a single command. The concept, in a database world will say, hey, I can run a command and list all my grants at once. That doesn't feature at all in the kind of Terraform world. So we started using some of that, but it was just far too slow for any of our customers at scale. So we ended up having to build a lot of our own. And that was fine. And that's been incredibly powerful. And a lot of our customers are using that. But ultimately, the optimum place to solve that very low level of I've got an object, does it have the latest configuration, is inside the target itself. So just saying, here's the new configuration. If you've already got it, or here's the configuration. If you've already got it, fine, move on, don't do anything. If you've got an older configuration, different configuration, make it look like this. It's far faster and more efficient to be able to do that inside Snowflake than it is to be able to do it externally, because we've got to make a request in, get the configuration back, compare the two, and so on and so on. So that primitive of comparing the configurations and applying them is best done inside Snowflake, no question. What still exists on the outside is things like, what order am I going to do these in? Where can I parallelize? Where do I have dependencies? How do I do environment management? So people consider kind of database change management as one thing. There's really actually two fundamental layers to it. There's that lower level of the individual objects and how do I make changes to them, and there's a higher level of, okay, how do I build a DAG of all of the objects, and which, there's no point in doing a change to a table if the database isn't there, for example, because it's going to break and things like that. So there's lots and lots of things to it. A lot of that stuff still has to happen outside Snowflake because that's customer specific. Customers have different ways they want to set things up, but moving that change management primitive inside Snowflake is a massive bonus for us. So the change management, I think when it first came out, this was only supporting tables and tasks. I think that's now expanding quite rapidly. I think by the end of this year, there's a significant number more objects supported. So kind of the way that we do it is, it used to be that we'd support all of these objects using our own mechanism, and then on top of that, we build these things like the environment management, the feature branches, the audit trails, and we build all that stuff on top. Over time, as database change management is supported by more and more of the those smaller building blocks, we just replace our version of it with a Snowflake version of it. And hopefully, my hope is in kind of 6 months time, all of that bottom, 2/3 will be blue, and we'll be using the Snowflake native version of it rather than the version that we've built. But what won't change is all that stuff across the top, the inheritance, the environment cleanups, the dependency calculations, the dry runs and previews, all of that sort of stuff is still going to be kind of like an outside capability that something that we provide on top.
Yep, that totally makes sense. I mean, one of the biggest reasons for in many organizations when they say like either the data is like not up to date or the data getting corrupted, does go back to this whole change management process, right? Because even though it looks as if like managing the even the schemas is like the most simplest thing to do, but that is where the majority of the organizations have the complexity of the change management, starting with the schema management. Specifically when you these days when you're working with any kind of data products that you're launching, the cross-team collaborations, not just from the data engineering perspective, but also the business users, is playing a really big role. So the cross-team collaborations and how you're really aligning those diverse teams and bringing the change management into the picture does play an important role. So
Yeah,
thanks for
I
deep.
just say that's a huge. It's worth just picking up a huge important point, because the number of objects that are being used for some of the more complicated use cases and the more sophisticated use cases, there are so many more objects, and the many-to-many relationship between them is so much higher. You think about, I'm building, I've got a compute pool and I've got external access integrations and I've got network rules and I've got this and I've got, it's no, people I think still have, when they think about database change management, they still think about schemas and tables and views, and of course, yes, there is a change management thing there, but actually, in looking forward, it's so many of these other objects. And of course, yes, my external access integration, I make a change and look, someone else's application just broke because I changed a firewall rule or something. So it's really kind of stepped beyond the level of just a pure data piece. It's now truly cloud applications and all of the dependencies that go with that. And so being able to collaborate effectively, being able to test and make sure you're not breaking other people's stuff, having the right governance so that if your stuff does break in a QA environment, you can immediately trace back and say, what changed and who changed it and why, is far more important now than I think it's ever been.
Absolutely. Yeah, specifically even with the security and privacy, the whole governance becoming a lot more important too, right? So even that plays a big role as part of this whole change management process, so that your compliance is actually is not only there in place, but also how it's evolving with your change management is also extremely important.
So I think just to kind of, to maybe I'll wrap up from my side, maybe you can give kind of your summary, Rithesh. But I think, in conclusion, I think, if I look at where these, where Snowflake DevOps capabilities fit with what we're doing, if we take that infrastructure management piece, if we talked about the database change management, that's very much a tactical piece by piece. I think one of the things we didn't talk about anything like as much as the orchestration and interfacing. Now there are some things in this that Snowflake, many things that Snowflake's never going to do. Snowflake's never going to deal with talking directly to hundreds of third-party tools. It's always going to be an external orchestration capability, but there will certainly be things like SnowGit for doing Git integration. Notebooks are becoming, we're seeing dramatically more popular usage of notebooks as a way of kind of sharing and collaborating. As it's a fantastic new capability. So we're adopting Snowflake capabilities there. And then the layers of the things that we build on top of it. These are the kind of the application capabilities that we're building using the stuff underneath. And ultimately, there will be more and more of the stuff underneath that that is kind of blue, and there's things that Snowflake provided primitively. We are focusing much more of our time building the stuff along the top, which is taking those building blocks, assembling them together, to make these these top level capabilities. The generative AI, the unified developer experience, the operate, which is the full CI/CD capability, all of the observability capabilities, and then all the ability to push this out to the business users through create and have non-technical users building and life cycling data products. So for people that kind of don't understand kind of how these two things fit together, to me it's the more of those blocks, particularly on kind of the bottom left that that Snowflake come out, particularly with DCM, the better. And certainly from an interfacing perspective, the more APIs that Snowflake make available to us that we can do these kind of advanced, powerful things, the better for all of our customers.
Absolutely. Yeah, just want to close it out from a Snowflake perspective, or specifically from my point of view, is just like you mentioned, Guy, right? Like specifically the whole AI. AI is, I strongly feel the AI is actually bringing the IT and business even a lot more together. So, which means like the cross-team collaboration to churn out this data products, and all. Specifically for your AI to work, you need to have a lot more stable data foundation, which is scalable in place. And in order for that to work, that's where you are specifically bringing in the whole observability and monitoring into the play, so that the data delivery is there, and also gaining the visibility into the health of your data, like the end-to-end data, like how you emphasize the change data management, and getting the insight into the health of your data and the performance, not just from the IT perspective, but also giving that visibility even for a business user will be extremely important, so that they can actually focus on creating those data products specifically from the AI perspective as well. So that's from my side of the view.
Yeah, and it's interesting. We talk about we've obviously been talking about data quality for many years, but one of the things that I'm still quite surprised by is that on one hand, the business, the enterprise, is still in a lot of cases not comfortable, or not is they still have not got their head around and still not fully comfortable. They've got the data quality that they want in a lot of organizations, and that they're still struggling with that even at the level of like dashboards and reports. And yet people want to push on to fully generative AI interfaces and chatbots and things like that. And it strikes me that there is an as yet kind of almost unexploded bomb, if you like, that the thing with bad data, when you get bad data in a dashboard, it often looks and it's obvious it's bad data. You can often see, okay, something's gone wrong here. There's data missing, or it's 100 times what it should be, or it's overlapping, or whatever. Whereas if you've got bad data and you've used it to fine tune an LLM, or an augment an LLM, you may still get what looks like a sane response. So I think that topic of really rigorous data quality as you put them through enterprise LLM processes is certainly something that over the next kind of 12 months, I see a lot of organizations are going to get beyond like the prototypes and the mock-ups, where people say, okay, well, actually we are making significant business decisions on the basis of this. We sure we can trust it, because what comes out looks so much more plausible, even if it's got kind of bad data in it.
Makes sense.
So I think just to to wrap up, we're very proud of our position with Snowflake, and I think all of the work that you just talked about that we've been doing together, was one of the reasons that we were given the Growth Partner of the Year, which we're extremely proud of. But as you were starting to say at the beginning, or talking about the beginning, the fact that Snowflake are now using DataOps.live for all the reasons we talked about, just despite and after all of those new releases of Snowflake's DevOps capabilities, Snowflake still chose DataOps.live to bring them together for their own use, for the Snowflake Solution Central, which is now, I mean, these stats are out of date, I think it's over 1,100 users, well over 100 data products, and I think it's trending for something like 20,000 deployments in the next year. And for me, maybe the nicest stat was, based on Snowflake's own internal measurements, doing this with DataOps.live was 360 times faster to deploy demo code than it was doing it the old way. So even for Snowflake, using DataOps.live is, orders of magnitude faster than the previous way that it was being done. So I think really just a testament to the great work that we're doing together, to the amazing the amazing capabilities inside Snowflake that make all of this possible, because we're always saying, we can't do anything that we do without Snowflake. But based on being exclusively on Snowflake, we're able to take advantage of these things where, if we'd have made the decision to go to other platforms, we'd have had to kind of maybe make compromises along the way. So, very comfortable with our decision to, to continue down the Snowflake only route. And I guess maybe it's a good time for us to open up with Q&A.
Yeah, we have some questions here. So Guy, this one's probably for you. How quickly can a developer come up to speed on DataOps.live, and what help is there for them to do that?
So I would say, so we have a whole set. We have a whole online academy, which is self-paced, and we also, for customers, have guided workshops. I would say to be effective takes a day. I would say to be an expert takes probably a week's worth of training and maybe a couple of weeks of experience. But it's becoming easier and easier, particularly with our cloud-based development environment, because you don't need anything installed locally. You can, with one click of a button, you can get a complete development environment with everything you need set up for it. And that's typically when people are trying to get started, that's actually the longest lead time item, is getting everything set up, all the right tooling, all of the right library versions, and so on and so on and so on, to just be able to press a button and get in your browser a complete environment with everything you need is actually one of the biggest accelerators that we can bring. So yeah, we've certainly had people being productive inside a day. And in fact, we had a hackathon recently where in the first 3 days, people who were new to the system have built five data products in 3 days, having never seen the system before.
Wow. Okay, this one's maybe for both of you, but what are the main differences between Snowflake DevOps and DataOps DevOps? DataOps.live DevOps.
So I think it's probably, a lot of it I think is things that we've covered. It's the difference between, the building blocks and the overall solution. You can't have one without the other. You can't build a solution without the building blocks that go into it. But the building blocks themselves, have to be put together. They have to be assembled. They have to have lots of things around them. So I would say it's not so much the difference between them, it's how one uses the other. DataOps uses the Snowflake DevOps components to allow it to achieve what it can do, and then builds value add capabilities on top of that.
Yeah,
Do you agree with that, Rithesh?
I'd probably even expand. Yeah, both cater to the same audience and all, but like one thing that DataOps.live extends is, like, think about like where you're creating a semantic layer on top of our building blocks, even for the business users, right? Specifically, we were talking about the cross-team collaborations and all. Obviously, from the Snowflake point of view, it's like predominantly targeted for the engineering, but DataOps.live is extending that layer even for the business users, getting like a lot more visibility and the collaboration between the business and the engineering as well. That's
a great point, because although obviously everything we do has Snowflake at the center of it, doesn't mean everything exclusively uses Snowflake. Take, for example, data cataloging. We work with pretty much all the major data catalog vendors, collecting all of the information, everything that's going on through the pipelines, and pushing it into the data catalog at the end, so that business users can see, for each data product, how fresh is it, what data quality tests were run, how well can I trust it. So obviously all of that data is using Snowflake, but the actual interfacing is kind of directly between DataOps and the data catalogs. That's something that knows Snowflake DevOps is ever going to get involved in, because it's completely outside of the actual business of the data itself. It's a completely separate layer. So there's lots of things that happen around Snowflake, but not necessarily going through it, that are all also critical to make this work for the business.
Okay. And the next question is, what Snowflake workloads are supported by DataOps.live?
Um, Basically, well, I'm going to say all of them. One of the nice things that we have because of our relationship with Snowflake, and also because we're working on we build the system that Snowflake SEs use to provide their demos. We get very early access to new Snowflake features and capabilities. So by the time, often by the time it even goes private preview, we've had access to it for a period of time to be able to adopt it and support it inside DataOps. So yeah, there's no Snowflake capability that we can't support. We support all tiers, all levels. We support all cloud regions, and actually, I mean, interestingly, we support any versions of that. So we've got lots of customers who have multiple different Snowflake accounts across multiple different regions. I think our largest customers got 60 or 70 different Snowflake accounts, all with their own completely separate infrastructure. But the reason that's not a complete nightmare, and the reason that's still got good governance, is because it's all being automatically built by DataOps. So it's everything from the lowest level, all the individual components, but all the way up to many accounts across different cloud providers across different regions.
Right. Yeah, it's an approach of a framework from Snowflake. It's a Snowflake enabler framework, right? So it's not really a feature by feature integration. That's where DataOps is a bit different from the other technology partners, because they're really enablers of the framework, not an integration from feature by feature perspective.
Okay. And there's another question about scaling to many developers, which I believe you already talked about in the webinar, but I figured I'd bring it up since someone asked. So how does the DataOps.live solution on top of Snowflake scale?
Yeah, so I think it's one of the most important and one of the most overlooked things, as I kind of started to allude to. It is relatively easy to solve a good chunk of these problems if you've got one team with 5 or 6 people and you're building 20 data products. Your challenges are relatively low. You've got a bunch of different technology you have to support, but the organizational, the collaboration challenges are relatively low. But as the team size increases from 5 to 50, the complexity goes up exponentially. So you go from 50 to 500, it goes up exponentially again. One of the things that we've always built DataOps for, and all of the DataOps founders are all enterprise software people, is we built it from the enterprise from day one. That means it's been designed to support thousands and thousands of users within a single organization, and the ability to not lose efficiency as you get higher and higher and higher. So we've got customers that have gone from 1 team to 10 teams to 100 teams to 300 teams. The largest customer we've got now has got about 400 teams, well over 500 engineers, but they are collaborating as effectively and they are as efficient as they were when they were down at 2-3 teams or 3 teams. And so because a lot of the stuff that we've put into DataOps is about how you do that federated governance, how you do that code reuse, how you get that balance between centralization so people can reuse things, reuse templates, inherit from reference projects, inherit from service catalogs, so that you get that massive efficiency. And obviously the more of that you have, because of more people, the more things that you can pull from. More people are contributing to it, more things you can pull from, but also giving people the independence at the edge to not be constrained by that and be able to run fast. So yeah, we very much focused on that from day one. We want to be as efficient for 500 or 1,000 users as you would be with 5 or 10.
Okay. A couple of hard-hitting questions here. First is, who are DataOps.live's biggest competitors, or who do we have competitors, and why should people choose DataOps.live over our competitors?
I think the biggest competitors would really be the ones that we talked about at the start. It's the likes of Airflow and Jenkins and Azure DevOps, but they're only competitors in the sense that a competitor to a car is kind of a part of sheet metal and rubber. Yes, ultimately with enough work you can get the sheet metal and the rubber into some sort of vehicle and you can get from A to B, but it's a fairly loose competition, because the amount of work you have to do to achieve the same thing is, you know, 2 orders of magnitude higher. So conceptually, they can be made to do the same thing, but you're going to have to put an enormous amount of your own, you know, company's work and time and effort into doing that. And if that makes sense for you, then that's absolutely fine. But for the vast majority of organizations, you know, they look at it and say, okay, what business are we in? Are we in the business of building a DataOps platform, or are we in the business of pharmaceuticals or telecommunications or sales or whatever? And you know, the vast majority of them say, this is completely crazy. We could, you know, for the cost of less than one person, we could just buy this off the shelf. Why would we even remotely think about building it? And say that's the analysis that Snowflake did, and said far cheaper for us to buy it from DataOps than for us to build it.
Okay. And the next question that this person has is, how much does it cost to get started?
So to get started, we have free trials, free versions. So for people that want to get started and want to evaluate it, we also have a very powerful customer success program, where we do a very you know, very intensive hand-holding exercise. So we get people from nothing to their, you know, their first data product in production, with their teams trained, with success criteria proven, you know, in a fixed period of time for a, you know, for a very low cost. Because that's usually what most organizations want to get to. Say, right, we want to get as quickly as possible to the point where we've got a number of data products in production using this approach, and then we can, you know, then we can decide and commit to move forward. So we've got programs specifically optimized around that. So, you know, if people want to know more, reach out to me. I'll put you in touch with the people in an organization that handle that.
Okay. And let's see, we have one more question here. How can I get started as a team of 3 engineers?
I would say if you want to get started at that level, if you probably go through Partner Connect is the best way. So DataOps.live is available in Partner Connect. That will get you a free trial version, and you can evaluate it from there. But to be clear, you know, we absolutely do, you know, we do have, you know, customers with a very small number of engineers, and DataOps, you know, can absolutely be cost effective down to, you know, that very small, you know, number of engineers. You know, obviously with 3 engineers, you know, you're not going to be able to build a complete DataOps platform. You know, if an organization inside of Snowflake can't justify building one, you know, a team with 3 engineers can't. So, you know, we have price efficiency and price effectiveness down to very small numbers of engineers, but also scaling up to, say, over thousands.
Okay, actually, another one. Can I import my existing Snowflake setup?
Yes. So we have a set of tooling as part of our DataOps CLI, which will scan your scan all your Snowflake infrastructure, and then bring that back into that, you know, that declarative infrastructure as code format. So yeah, you can, you know, you don't have to go and, you know, recode things that you've done inside Snowflake. It will scan it and bring it in as, you know, it's essentially as ready to go.
Okay, great. I think that's it for today.
Hey, anything else from you, Ritesh?
Yeah, again, Guy and Rasad, like really thank you for all the innovation that you're really driving us, like keeping up with our product innovation, and really helping us, like how, like you just mentioned, right? Like we have so many building blocks, but how you are really orchestration, bringing to the play specifically for the Snowflake platform, and bringing that scalability, not just from the IT ops perspective, but also being a bridge between the business and IT. Thank you, as always, not only just like from the customer perspective, but also helping internally our own SE organization to be better in front of the customers with your operational efficiency. So thanks again for all the great partnership.
Oh, thank you. Really appreciate it. And yeah, so Snowflake doesn't always make it easy for us, because they're releasing so much good stuff at such an impressive rate, but we wouldn't have it any other way. All right. Thanks very much, Ritesh. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.